Welcome to episode 22 of the Building a Bulletproof Back podcast. Joining me today, I have Mike Sententia. Hope I got that right.
You did?
Who's going to share with us some of his amazing knowledge about energy healing, specifically how that relates to back pain. And I know this is not actually a topic we've covered. So I'm really pleased, Mike, that you've given us 30, 40 minutes of your time to educate us about energy medicine. Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So, I'm the founder of Healing Lab, which is an energy healing practice for chronic pain, uniquely offers a money back guarantee on all our sessions. Uh, my second book coming out later this year, Transforming Pain, the Emerging Science of Energy Healing for Pain Management. I've been working with energy and energy healing for most of my life. And my mission and the mission of Healing Lab is to become an industry partner for other researchers, help understand what energy healing is and how it works so that we can make it mainstream and covered by insurance. And I'm excited to reach folks who might normally never consider energy healing and let them learn a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, let's hit that head on. Hey, let's talk about
Mhm.
the skepticism towards energy medicine. We possibly both understand why there is a healthy skepticism. And speak to that for me. I think you're a bit of an advocate for being skeptical initially.
Absolutely. I think skepticism is the correct stance to take when it comes to energy healing. And most of my clients start out as skeptics. I routinely have people tell me the only reason I'm trying this is because of the money back guarantee. And then they come in, they get results, they text me, a week later, oh my God, I feel so much better. I'm becoming a believer. But it's experiencing it for yourself. It's seeing either evidence in your own life or evidence in peer reviewed research that I think is what should move people from skepticism to confidence, right? It shouldn't just be being too polite to ask me if this stuff is real.
Do you think that someone's beliefs about whether energy medicine can work or not can block the physical effects of it within the body? So, does the power of the subconscious welcome or deny the influence of energy medicine?
I couldn't disagree with that more. So whenever I hear somebody say, oh, the client has to believe in it or the client has to want it to work. So, both in my experience and in the research, what it shows us is that belief is not important. Belief definitely matters for placebo. And so, if what you're getting, if some chunk of the results you're getting is from placebo, yeah, the client's belief matters a lot. But when most of my clients are skeptics, they get the same results. And in the
Mm.
research, some of my favorite studies. So Beverly Rubik took E. coli, just bacteria, heated them up until they were almost dead. That's called heat shock. And then the ones that got energy healing recovered. The ones that didn't died.
Mhm.
E. coli doesn't believe anything. It's acting on a cellular level. A researcher named Javeri took human and animal cells, osteoblasts, keratinocytes, so bone and fingernail cells, put them in a petri dish and starved them, and then gave them some nutrients. And the ones that got energy healing absorbed more of the nutrients than the ones that didn't, like they were recovering and getting ready to grow. So, what this tells us is that energy healing acts on the cells of the body. It's
Mhm.
not a thing that I say and you believe, and then your belief influences your body. What it's telling me is that there is an actual phenomenon out there. And I realize I should have started with what is energy healing for your audience. So, energy healing is working with the body's natural energy field. In the East, it would be called chi or prana. In the West, it's just called energy. It seems that living cells produce this energy, that healthy cells produce healthy chi, and inflamed cells produce inflamed chi, and so on. And by adjusting the energy around the cells, we can influence them over time and promote health and healing. And that's what I do. And so, like when I'm working with a client with knee pain, for example, I have this one client, she comes in, she sits on the edge of the massage table, she takes out her laptop, puts it in her lap, answers emails while I read the energy of her knees and adjust the energy, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't believe in energy healing. Uh, except that it's working for her. I routinely have clients say, "This is so strange. I don't know what's going on, but it's working, so I'm going to keep doing it."
Like,
You don't have to believe in it for it to work.
yeah. Well, that's amazing. Do you believe the cells, well, my belief is the individual cells have their own consciousness and that the cells of the knee form a collective consciousness, the cells of the shoulder form a collect. So there's levels of
Mhm,
consciousness within the greater consciousness, which, I often use the analogy of a world map. We
mhm,
have Australia and New Zealand and
mhm,
America, which, we have a shoulder, we have an abdomen, we have a foot. They're just
mhm,
regions within a greater collective. And I guess it's part of I do believe in these in the cellular consciousness and the wisdom withheld in it that can be accessible through internal inquiry. But yeah, different strokes for different folks, whatever sort of belief
mhm.
structure works for them. How do you specifically, Mike, work with the energy? Do you have a specific technique that's unique to you?
That's a great question. I've taken training in Reiki and therapeutic touch and some other systems, but most of what I use day to day are techniques that I've developed on my own over the last 20 or 30 years. Initially working with a nurse to understand the underlying physiology of the conditions I was working with, and then later just developing techniques for clients as needed. A lot of systems of energy healing take this approach of using one universal energy for everything. So, someone has arthritis, someone has insomnia, someone has back pain. They're all getting the same thing. Well, think about it. If you had to prescribe the same treatment for all three of those patients, it'd be really limiting in what you could do. So, I take
Mm,
a different approach. I dial in just the right energy for each tissue involved in the condition. So,
mhm,
when I'm working with back pain, I'll have one energy for the muscles that are in spasm,
mhm,
another energy for the tendons or ligaments or connective tissue that is inflamed, another energy signature for if there's inflammation in the spine itself that sometimes happens with degenerative disc disorders. And then, in particular, when nerves signal pain over and over, they learn to signal pain better and better. And that's what
mm,
chronic pain is. And it
mm,
has a unique physiology and a unique energy signature. And what I do is I suppress that energy signature for those nerves that are signaling pain. And over, for so many of my clients, their pain drops in about a minute. I
well,
do my thing, and then I say, great, now try it out. And they'll walk around or stretch or do whatever was bringing them pain, and they're already feeling the change. It turns out that if you want skeptics to come back, it's really important to get a obvious result fast. They know that it's working. And it took a lot of effort to get there, but part of the key to that is is working with each tissue separately. So that's what I do.
and you have that unique ability to tune into the tissue frequencies and basically balance them back into. Is there a significant? Does the body have its own uniform frequency, or are you saying that we're a blend of many frequencies?
What I would say is that each tissue of the body has its own energy signature, which the term signature, sometimes people will say frequency, sometimes they'll say color or pattern. And so I would say that each tissue has its own energy signature, that
Mhm,
healthy tendon tends to look like healthy tendon, but inflamed tendon looks different from healthy tendon, right? So it's based on both the type of tissue, tendon versus muscle versus bone, and the state of that tissue. Now, there's individual differences also, right? Like the muscle in your body has a different energy signature than the muscle in my body.
mm.
Each person seems to have an underlying energy signature. And one of the keys to getting good results is to match that underlying signature also, basically tuning the energy to their body rather than using energy that's my default energy signature that's not going to work for a lot of people.
Gotcha. Good point. And so then how do you go about doing remote sessions? What does that look like?
That's a great question. So a lot of energy healers, what they will do is they will meditate on your picture. And so they'll like get on a Zoom call like we're on now, and they'll focus on the image. And I always ask myself, does that really work? How reliable can that be? And so I take a different approach. I make an energy connection to a business card. I had these metal cards printed up specifically for this, so they last forever. So I make an energy connection to the card. I put a little bit of my energy in the card. I mail it to you. And then when we have our session, my energy is still in here and I can use it like a homing beacon. And so you put the card wherever we're working with. And I use my connection to the card to make a strong connection to your body and send the energy to just the right spot. And honestly, it's still a little strange to me sometimes that the laws of physics allow for this to happen. And yet
Mhm.
people's pain keeps coming down. So I keep believing in it.
Yeah, it is so hard for our minds to stretch into these realms beyond what we can see, taste, and touch. And yet we all know. I always think about wind. Every
Hmm.
time I can see trees moving, sometimes I can hear it, but I can never
Hmm.
see it. And yet I know it exists. So it's, we're surrounded in examples of energy, but it's very hard to, especially if we've had a math science training, to conceive concepts beyond the concrete. So, like you said, an embodied experience of it is often the best way to form a relationship with the energy.
One of the things that comes to my mind when people talk about, I believing in things that you can't see or touch is most of the things that we believe in that we can't see or touch, we have an understanding of the underlying mechanism. We know how they work, or at least we trust that scientists know how they work, right? I can't see or touch radio waves, but I know how you produce them. I know what they are. I know how they relate to light and other things, right? We have an understanding of it in a way that we don't yet with energy healing. But here's the thing. Every few generations, humanity encounters a phenomenon that's missing from the science of the day. 100 years ago, that was quantum physics, and everyone knows about the bizarre behavior of photons. What most
Mm.
people don't realize is that quantum physics gave us semiconductors and transistors, which are the basis for phones and computers and the internet. And those are pretty good. 100 years before that, when alchemy was a science, the reigning theory of how fire worked is that wood contained phlogiston, and the flames were the phlogiston leaving the wood. And that's why things weigh less when they burn, because the phlogiston left. Now, you've probably never heard of phlogiston because, it doesn't exist. But alchemy was a science, and that was the theory at the time. Anton Lavoisier started weighing different materials as they burn. And he discovered that magnesium weighs more when it burns. Well, it lost its phlogiston, so how does it weigh more? Well, you and I know that's because magnesium oxide is a solid. So when magnesium burns, it picks up oxygen atoms and now it weighs more. But half those words didn't exist back then. In fact, Lavoisier, from this research, coined the word oxygen. And this is widely regarded as the dawn of chemistry. 100 years before that, when people believed that diseases were caused by demons and bad air, breakthroughs in glassmaking led to the first lenses. And Antony van Leeuwenhoek, he was a Dutch weaver, and he bought some lenses to do quality control in his thread to make better cloth. And then he turned around and he looked at, blood and saliva and swamp water, and he was the first human to see single cell organisms. He called them animalcules, like animal molecules smashed together.
Mm.
And it was a long path, but this ultimately led to the germ theory of disease in modern medicine. And antibiotics and vaccines are pretty good too. So we have this pattern of discovering an anomaly, right? Finding something that the reigning theory says shouldn't be there, and then coming to understand it. And 100 years later, or several hundred years later, sometimes it's led to the technology of the modern world that we all rely on today. And energy healing doesn't have a mechanism in today's physics or chemistry or biology. And I think that's really important to understand when we're trying to understand the skepticism. It's not people being closed-minded. It's understandable skepticism because there's no mechanism of action in today's
Mhm.
sciences.
That's a good point.
And yet, it's producing results from real people in the real world. And it's
Mhm.
also showing results in the lab, not just the cell culture studies I was talking about. Research by Stephen Schwartz and William Tiller shows it affecting the pH and infrared reflectivity of water. Research by Gloria Gronowitz shows you take mice with cancer, the mice that get energy healing, the cancer does not metastasize as much. One of my favorite studies by Melinda Connor takes plant clippings. The plant clippings that are just in water without energy healing all die within 30 days. The plant clippings that get the energy healing all live for the full 90 days of the study. There's no overlap between the two. There's research, there's placebo-controlled trials on humans that show decrease in pain, anxiety, and stress. And last year, Bill Bengston did the first double-blind placebo-controlled trial of energy healing. He was looking at COVID-19. And in his study, the folks who got energy healing had significantly reduced duration and intensity of symptoms. For any scientists in the audience, the p-value for all of the non-human research is stronger than 1 in 1,000, which is 10 times stronger than most medical research and 3 times stronger than physics evidence. And the p-value for the human research is typically in the 1 in 100, which meets medical standards. So we have this phenomenon that's not part of today's science, but is producing results in the real world and is producing results in the lab. And when we come to understand it, it will lead to breakthroughs in the physical sciences and the next century of technology. And that's why I do what I do.
Great. I mean, I love your research base for what you do. So, what do you think has to happen for energy medicine to be accepted as part of a mainstream management process for health?
That's a great question. So the first thing to recognize, when I talk to energy healers and energy healing researchers, I sometimes get frustration that like they don't see how it will ever be accepted, and they can't imagine that day happen. The first thing to realize is scientific revolutions, where I was just talking about with discovering this anomaly and then coming to understand it, take around 100 years. We've been researching energy healing for around 50 years. So we're halfway through. So it seems like that's a long way off. That's because 50 years is a long time in a human lifetime. My upcoming book is all about the science and how do we make that happen? How do we move that along? And I think
Mm.
there's 3 components. The first component is we need research to replicate. And this largely already exists, right? There's those cell culture trials, there's the studies on water. What we need to do is just nail down the procedure exactly so that we can replicate it over and over on demand. Number two is we need funding. From 2002 to 2008, there was $1 million a year in funding from the NIH. That's the US main governmental funding for medical research, $1 million a year. And then in 2008, that dried up. And these days, all of the funding is from like professional organizations and like people who are interested. So we need an industry partner, right? For better or worse, the reason why there's so much money in farm research is because there's industry funding it. So we need an industry partner, and that's what I'm trying to grow into. And then the third is we need a demo, right? People who work with energy feel energy, and people who don't. And that's not great for our credibility. So we need a technique that produces sensations in the majority of the population. What I notice is when I'm doing what I do with nerves, people are getting results in a minute or less, which is fast enough to do a demo. And so it is a matter of engineering to either adapt that to produce numbness in an obvious way in people who don't have chronic pain, or produce other sensations like heat or tingling in those people. But that is one of my long-term projects that I'm working on kind of at the same time as I'm working on making the healing techniques more effective and longer lasting and kind of thing.
Yeah, wow. I'd imagine occasionally, perhaps amongst your fellow energy workers,
Mhm.
are there levels of effectiveness that vary between a skilled and beginner energy worker?
Absolutely. And there are levels of effectiveness that vary from system to system. What the research tells us when you do placebo controlled trials on Reiki, therapeutic touch, and the other systems that have been studied, it seems to work for a couple of days, right? So when an energy healer wants to see you every week or twice a week, that's because what the research tells us is the energy tends to wear off. I've put a lot of work into making my stuff last longer. And so for most of my clients, they only need one session every 4 weeks. And that's actually the guarantee that I have guarantees the results for 4 weeks. I check in with folks every week. If every so often somebody has their pain come back, maybe they overdid it, maybe just individual differences, they get a free touch up session where I readjust the energy and get it working again for them. And one of the keys to getting it working like that is getting that feedback, is having clients where it's not lasting for them, reach out to me so that I can observe what's going on with the energy. How is it misaligned? How does it need to be adjusted? And make the energy that I set up in the first place that much more robust and reliable. So huge variance in how long this stuff lasts. And I think that's one of the real keys to making a mainstream product that people really want to buy and can grow the kind of company that can drive that research and drive that mainstream appeal.
I can't help but reflecting as you're saying that, though, the variance in how long the energy
Hmm.
holds or the
Hmm.
therapeutic intervention holds
Hmm.
possibly has a lot to do with the physical being and how they're using their body. Any emotional addictions, any food addictions, any relationship stress, work stress, all the usual
Hmm.
factors that interfere with healing. So, are we not disempowering people a little bit by having someone else do the work for them? I'm wondering how we have that individual reflect on why their energy improvements aren't sticking and perhaps have them start to take some ownership of why rather than relying on an external person to keep mopping it up for them. That's how my mind works. What are your thoughts?
I love that you're asking me hard questions. And I really like that orientation of we want people to be empowered in their own health. I think that's so important. I have a nutritionist on staff who helps out clients who want to improve it that way. I have a health coach that I refer people out to. I think that giving people their own tools that they can use to further improve their health, whether that's reducing stress, improving nutrition, improving, exercise and how they move, improving ergonomics. I think those are super important. When it comes specifically to the energy, there's really two cases. One of them is everyone overdoes it at some point. And what I tell people, I have this talk that I give at the end of every session that basically says, hey, the number one problem that people have is they've been they've been having pain and they've been wanting to go do that hike or whatever activity, right? And their pain comes down and now they go do the thing and their body's not stronger yet, right? Then I set up some energy for the nerves and I set up different energy for the muscles and the tendons, and the energy for the nerves goes really fast. And the energy for the rest of the stuff takes a few months to set in. And so I give everybody this coaching about, hey, whatever you could do before, enjoy doing with less pain. And whatever you couldn't do before, hold off for a few months.
Mhm.
And also, everyone overdoes it at some point because it's just so hard to like hold yourself back from wanting to do the thing. And so I try to be really understanding and supportive and just help them out. But the other thing, when I set up the energy, there are huge individual differences. This has been my main project for the last year, is increasing the reliability and making it last long for almost everyone. And what I find is that for some people, they have just their energy signature is simpler than others. And it's easier for me to get all of the parts of the energy signature for some people than it is for others. And I don't have a good theory for why. Part of it seems to be down to the severity and duration of the pain. That people who have more severe pain for years and years tend to have more complex energy signatures, but
Mhm.
not always. Sometimes
Mm.
they still have simple ones. Sometimes people who only recently got pain have a really complex one. It doesn't, there's no pattern of like age or gender or any of those kind of normal things. So I don't know why some people's energy is just more intricate and complex than
Mhm.
others,
Mm.
but it is. And when I work with someone whose energy is more intricate and complex, it's more difficult for me to get every detail of the part of the energy signature that's involved in pain, which means that as over the course of time, their energy signature is going to shift, right? Just they have more pain one day, they overdo it, they rest more. The energy of the body changes over time. And I need to set up my energy to be robust against those changes. And people who have a more complex energy signature, it's more challenging to make my energy complete and robust that I set up for them. And so for those folks, that's kind of where the touch ups come in. And it's really been tremendous getting this feedback from people of how good
Mhm.
is it working and is it lasting and is it performing as advertised?
Mm.
And it lets me find the places where it's not and figure out how to do a better job of getting that full and complete energy signature. And
Mm.
sometimes when I do a podcast for energy healers, they ask me, what advice do I have to practitioners? And it's find out when it didn't work and offer them a freebie and look at what went wrong and figure it out because that's how you get better. And that's been my greatest source of improvement in the last year.
I found it so interesting that you offer a money back guarantee when physios, chiros, osteopath don't, and let's face it, we've all been to therapists that are science trained and the results are still not consistent and
Mhm.
reliable often,
Yeah.
even amongst so-called scientifically based practices. And again, I often feel because our body in any moment is in a
Mhm.
very different state depending on how we're feeling. I think emotions and the vibration of tissue is the variable that is rarely monitored or standardized for in any sort of research trial. So we there's so many layers of complexity to how we are and how we exist in the world. And I love that you're attempting to create a systemized pathway of robustness to fit into a model
Yeah.
that demands it. And good luck. So can
Thank
see
you. So,
can see why you're taking that approach, and it's an eternal challenge, I guess. So let's talk about for you. When I say bulletproof
mhm.
back, what comes to
Yeah.
mind? What do you perceive that as?
What I think of is resilience. I think that at some point in our lifetimes, everyone's going to have back pain. A lot of people are going to have injuries. I don't think it's something that you can 100% prevent. So, what I think of is resilience and healing and improving and having all of the tools to support you in that. And that's what I
Mm.
try to be one of those tools.
Beautiful. And so someone in persistent back pain, perhaps
Mhm.
considering energy work, what are your top tips for them? Where do they go? How do they find someone good? What questions should they ask? What are the things that you think are relevant for them? Because it's a vulnerable population. Anyone in pain is vulnerable. They're seeking an answer. They can easily be manipulated into taking actions that really aren't aligned with their higher value. So there is a need to be educated and to be equipped with some knowledge. So what sort of things do you think would be useful for them to know?
That's a great question. So, the first thing to look for is someone who guarantees their work. And so, first ask, hey, do you offer a money back guarantee? If I'm not happy, do I get my money back? Most energy healers, just like most physios and chiropractors, everyone like that, they view it as they're paid for their time, they're paid for their effort. I take a different view. I think I should be paid for the results. And I think it's really important dealing with a vulnerable population. And it's really important to work with people who have an understandable skepticism. I want to be able to help folks. I can only help folks if they're willing to give it a try. And the only way they should be willing to give it a try is if I put my money where my mouth is, right?
Mhm.
The follow-up question to that, wait, how does it work, right? Do I have to jump through a bunch of hoops? Do I have to give you 5 sessions first and then I hope I get my money back? The way it works for me is you only pay if you're happy. So you come in for a session, no upfront payment. We send you an invoice afterward. If you like the results, pay the invoice. If you don't like the results, don't pay the invoice. And
Mm,
so if you're not happy, there's no hoops to jump through. You just don't
mhm,
pay. It's
mm,
really, and it should be that simple, right?
mm,
Somebody who's telling you that they can help you or that wants you to trust that they can help you should be putting their money where their mouth is like that.
mm,
The next question, hey, have you ever given a refund or have you ever had folks not pay? And what you're looking for is a yes. You want that honesty because nothing works for everyone. And you want when I have this guarantee, it's not a promise that your pain's going to come down. It's a promise that if your pain doesn't come down, you don't pay a cent, right? So you want someone who will be honest with that. That's how you can tell that they really believe in what they're doing and they don't want to overpromise. I want to also share a couple things to not look for too much. A lot of people like to look for a bunch of certifications. In medicine, certifications and licensing matter a lot because there are state boards, there's a lot of regulation, there is a very high standard for becoming a doctor, becoming a physio, right? In energy healing, there are certifications vary wildly, and you can become certified in a lot of systems in a few weekend workshops. And being certified in a system doesn't mean that the person who's practicing it is particularly effective with it. And it doesn't mean that that system is going to work for you as an individual or for your condition. So that's why I say look for the guarantee and then don't worry so much about the certifications. And then look for testimonials. And in particular, look for video testimonials, right? I always feel like I'm a lot more confident seeing a video testimonial, seeing that the testimonial is also on Yelp or Google and not just on the practitioner's website. So you see that it's really working for people. But in particular, we all know about like buying testimonials on those websites. And so having the video, it gives, at least for me as a customer, it gives you a
Mm,
higher level of this really is a real person.
that's great. You make it very easy for people to step out of their comfort zone and have an experience. And when clients ask me, "Should I try this? Should I try that?" It's like, well, you really have to do your research, trust your gut,
Mhm,
and at the end of the day, ask the practitioner if they can guarantee no harm. I don't mind if there's no positive benefit, but as long as there's no
mhm,
harmful benefit, I
mhm.
usually say, why not give it a go? Because you just don't know. I think that's one of my big ones. I don't mind people experimenting with anything as long as there's some measure of guarantee that there will be no ill effects.
That's a great point. Energy healing is famous for being a might help and doesn't hurt kind of a.
Exactly. Yeah, which is why it's one of the safer ones for people to have
Mhm.
a little experience of. And
Yeah.
I would say, purely strategically, if you've tried manual therapy, if you've tried
Mhm,
osteopathy, if you've tried psychology, if you've tried nutrition,
mhm,
you really need to step into some different realms to just to tick your own boxes on all angles. What can I bring to the table that isn't something that I've really brought to the table before? So, Mike, I loved having the chat with you. Can you let us know where if any listeners are like, right, he's sold me on the idea of energy medicine, I'm really gonna have a little go. Where can they
yeah.
find you and what sort of resources have you got available for people?
Absolutely. Go to healinglab.org. You can book your free consultation there. You get a half hour chatting with me, and I'll answer all your questions. You can also sign up for our mailing list where you're going to get no spam, just one email a month with some tips. I also get a free electronic copy of my first book, Arthritis, Natural Health and Prevention, all about how do you avoid getting arthritis and avoid having it get worse if you do have it. And then you'll also find links to I have a holistic chronic pain support group on
Yeah, I
Facebook.
saw
You
that.
can just search that.
That looks great.
Thank you. And so we post resources there also. And I also just get, a supportive community of folks who are all dealing with pain and trying to find ways of either supplementing the mainstream healthcare or taking less pills or that kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I would strongly advocate a group like that rather than some of the book back pain groups that I am in, purely because I'm
Mhm.
always interested in the languaging and the psychology of people in pain. They're horrendous. They're like the worst place in the world to be if you are in pain because it's
Mhm.
very fear based, it's very negative, and if you listen to that for long enough, you would really start to believe that you're in it forever. There's a lot of
Mhm.
bad messaging in those groups, and I get people needing to feel connected to other people who are in a similar space, but I do think it's really important to find a group that is selling positive messaging and looking at all aspects of our pain situation rather than the doom and gloom, surgical, highly medicated
Mhm.
approach. So, yeah, I'll be highlighting that link in the show notes.
Thank you. And healinglab.org for your free consultation.
That's superb. Hey, look, Mike, thank you for your time and thank you for what you do. Thank you for taking a fairly science approach to energy medicine and trying to refine the techniques. People like you are quite rare. It's really great that you're thinking about how to bring this into the mainstream because the mainstream isn't necessarily going to evolve rapidly. And I think it's kind of smart to acknowledge it isn't. And so if we wish to see things change, we need to work within the system that we find ourselves in, even if we don't agree with the system. It is what it is, and we can only try and channel and direct and gently pull it this way or that way with our own efforts. I really loved that's what you're attempting to. Thank you for your time, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me.